Afternoon, and welcome to the Quaking Art Gallery's special exhibition. Today, we are pleased to host the sole exhibition of Neal Harrington's Potent Parables. In this show, Mr. Harrington uses his printmaking skills to fuse the rich traditions of Greek and Roman culture with American root music, creating a visual ballad of intense energy, atmosphere, and storytelling. Originally from Rapid City, South Dakota, Neal holds a BFA in painting and an MFA in printmaking, and his work has been celebrated nationwide. He received numerous prestigious awards, including the Arkansas Art Center's Delta Award and the Bow Art Award. Neal is also a dedicated professor at Arkansas Tech University, where he continues to inspire young artists. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Neal Harrington.
Thank you. Good job. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me here. I want to welcome y'all to my talk. Yeah, exactly. I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota. Has anybody ever been to South Dakota? Yeah, well, you've probably heard of Mount Rushmore or Crazy Horse. And I grew up in Rapid City, which is about 20 minutes right down the road from that. I didn't go to a lot of, I didn't grow up in a culture of museums and art. I grew up in the north side of Rapid City, which was the lowest income level of that town. The Rosebud, Pine Ridge reservations are right by where I grew up. And so we didn't have a lot of, I attended a lot of powwows. They would have honest to God powwows in my grade school and things where people would come. So I got a lot of Native American culture, but I'll go back to that, but my art museums were gas stations. I would go look at the comic books or Safeway. This was a whole different time. Now to think about doing this with your little kids, you'd be arrested, but we'd go into Safeway or someplace, and I'm going with comic books, and I'd run to the toys or comic books, and my mom would do all of her shopping and everything, and I didn't know it then, but I was really learning a lot about art because, for one, I would just look at what I was interested in, from Mad comic books to Hulk, Spider-Man, X-Men. Oh my God, the way X-Men is so popular now. When I was a kid, that would blow my mind. I think my mom mentioned Wolverine one time before she passed. Mom knows who Wolverine is. Like, no one knew X-Men stuff at that time. So I would copy comic books. That's how I really got into art. That's kind of what this journey is. I have way more slides than I'll probably use, but I like to show my students, because I teach figure drawing and illustration, I like to show those students where I started and what I was doing as a kid. I'll jump back real quick. This is where a lot of you are at if you're in college. The first college I went to, it took me 3 colleges and 6 years to get my BFA, because I didn't really commit. Right from Rapid City, I went to Moorhead, Minnesota, and this is my sketchbook from that very first drawing class with Deborah Mae Broad, who's a pretty famous printmaker. She's retired now. I didn't know that then. It was just, that was my drawing professor. And you could see at midterm, I had a C+. By the end, I was able to raise it up. The one thing I want to draw attention to is why didn't I see your sketchbook at midterm? Why don't you think that the teacher saw my sketchbook at midterm? I didn't have nothing in it, so I didn't turn it in. I didn't have nothing. But luckily, I was able to kind of attend class and keep going. And these are some of my examples from 1988. You can see I was interested in Ninja Turtles and Simpsons, just pop culture things. Again, I wasn't going to the museums looking at Picasso and Van Gogh and Renoir and all these kind of things that I idolize now. I was just trying to copy things. I was really infatuated with Conan magazines, the Savage Sword of Conan, these black and white comic books that Ernie Chan had drawn. So I would copy these big splash pages. If anybody knows about comic books, like when it's just a big full panel, it's a splash page or a double splash page. I have no idea why I drew this twice. I don't even remember drawing it, but I did. This is just something from when I was younger. I have absolutely no clue. I would draw things out of my head, and that's what my folks, who were just, not to belittle it in any way, as you may have heard, my father just passed, and my mother passed 6 years ago. My dad, if you've ever flown on a plane and they've lost your luggage, you contact the airport and some guy shows up later with your luggage. That's what my dad did in Rapid City. He did that, and he worked at a car wash and other things. And my mom was a secretary at the local newspaper. But they were encouraging enough, they were cautiously optimistic of me having an art degree, because who does that? We didn't know anybody that did that. We just worked jobs. But they would encourage me to, you should make more things up out of your head. So being a teenage kid, I would make up, your angsty things, weird holidays. I have no idea. This is me in a post-apocalyptic world with, super awesome abs, like a rogue-looking type super lady. Neal the Man of Steel, it says in the bottom corner. I would practice, and eventually, now I don't draw as much what I think things look like. I see and I draw what I'm seeing. And that's something I tell in my figure drawing classes all the time. If people are having a hard time, or they'll say something in my class right away like, I don't know how to draw that. And I'll say, perfect, because you shouldn't be thinking. It's the one time in my life. I'm kind of more of as I refer to myself as like a chihuahua in a husky body, like a fairly big guy, but I'm very hyper. The one time I calm down and I'm kind of living in the moment is when I'm drawing, because I'm not thinking. I'm just reacting, especially if I'm just copying something or drawing people. Influences to my art. Has everybody seen the show over there? If you haven't, we'll be going over there. Influences that I continually come back to, that I'm really into: Tom Waits, John Prine, Bob Dylan, Robert Johnson, authors who've written amazing books like Hunter S. Thompson. Coincidentally, Donald Harrington. Has anyone ever heard of Donald Harrington? No relation. He just has one R in his name. In fact, I'd heard that he had taken one of the R's out. He's a very famous Arkansas author, and he wrote a series called the Staymore series that talks about a little fictional town in Arkansas. Strange things happen there. I guess I would liken it to, I'm a real child of the 90s. If anybody's ever seen Northern Exposure, it's almost kind of like that. It's a quirky little town where different interesting things happen. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but a lot of different things happen. Well, Donald Harrington taught at the University of Arkansas for a very long time, and he's a big influence on me, so his Staymore series. Also, Conrad Richter, who's another author that I really enjoyed, his series, The Awakening Land, kind of the development of America. Again, visually, I was into Conan, R. Crumb, if you've ever heard of him, the X-Men. Now it's everywhere. There's so many X titles. I used to collect so many comic books, and now I'm just not that interested. That's what I wanted to do when I went to college, and that was kind of the kiss of death at that time. Now comics are a huge industry. If you said you wanted to draw comics in the early 90s, they really looked down their nose at you and thought, this guy, get out. But now, it's such a huge industry. Then in graduate school, I was introduced to the chair of the department at that time was named Donald Byram. And he was a printmaker, but he was also the chair of Wichita State. And he introduced me to Lind Ward, and that really changed my life. Lind Ward was a printmaker that, much like what I do, doing relief, but he would take these narratives and create a whole novel without words. So you could tell what the story was, like a comic book, incredibly like a graphic novel. But this was in the 1920s. So as I said before, to backtrack a little, I was a painter, and I was a terrible painter. Boy, was I. My family also, my grandparents had a house painting business. So I was born with a job. As soon as I could pick up garbage or do anything, I was on the paint crew. So in college at the University of South Dakota to get my BFA, where I ended up, I would work for house painters. And, you're painting the wall, and sometimes awkwardly the homeowner would come out and try to make conversation with the workers, and they would come out as I'm painting, and, oh, you go to the college? Mm-hmm, yep. What are you studying? Painting. And they would look at me like, I didn't know they taught house painting there. And no, art painting. And then they would just slowly disappear into the bushes like Homer in the city. They didn't know what to say. Well, anyways, I was painting. I was working as a house painter. I was going to college. And this was the kind of wild, crazy painting I was trying to do. In fact, one of my friends hated this painting. I show this one, and all I could find were slides. So this is a picture of a projection of a slide. Back in the day, you had to use slides. And so I couldn't find any real pictures in this painting. I don't know where it is, but it was pivotal in my development as an artist, because before I made this painting, I was kind of making paintings and trying to get into do you guys have a student competitive here? Well, at University of South Dakota, we all wanted to get into this competitive show that was just for the University of South Dakota students, called the Wilbur Stillwell exhibit. You would submit 3 or 4 works into the gallery, and then a juror who was not one of the professors would come through and select works. Well, my cubicle mate, my painting studio mate, hated this painting so much, he goes, if that gets into the Stillwell, I quit. Well, not only did it get in, I won an award. And I can't believe the name Guy Scopoletti. I have no idea what this is about. I was just painting, I would just mix colors on the canvas and just spend time with it. Sometimes just looking at things is working. I would just look at it, and I guess I could liken it to seeing Jesus in the wood paneling. You ever look at wood paneling and you see stuff in it? That's kind of what I would do with the paintings, and then I would just develop it from there. Well, I developed this painting, and I'd always go home or go to my job, and there was some lawn care service, and it was Guy Scopoletti Lawn Care, and I'm like, that guy sounds like a gangster. So I made this painting about Guy Scopoletti, who I had no idea what he looked like. Well, this got into the show, and before cell phones, you had an answering machine, and I got back to my apartment, and I found out my piece got in the show, and my cubicle mate, where we would paint together at the school, left me a voice message on my machine, and I played it, and he just said, Guy Scopoletti, and then he flushed his toilet. I wish I kept that message, but anyways, he was so mad. That award, and the award I won, $50. $50. It's not always the amount. It's not always the amount you win, but that told me I had worth, someone saw worth in that. The chair of the department awarded me. It was the chair's award. It wasn't the biggest award. It was probably the smallest award. But that told me, maybe I can do this. Someone gave me money for this. Before then, I hadn't sold anything. And this is a giant painting. It didn't sell for that. I just got the money. Half of this is, this is 5 foot by 4 foot, and I bolted them together. I mean, these were big paintings I was making. So bigger's always better in painting and in printmaking. You can see these all the time. Just some of my other paintings. This was probably my more successful one, where this actually had a naked lady laying here, and it had a cup of coffee on her stomach. And I started painting it out because I was going to paint over it. And then again, sometimes eliminating information is just as good as adding information. And it just kind of suddenly became something. I mean, I was really just kind of growing as an artist, trying to do interesting things. Just more paintings that I was making, using different types of material, like blackjack. When you have a leak in your roof, or you're trying to plug something up, you'll go to the hardware store and get some blackjack. Or I was gluing or pasting T-shirts to it and using spray paint, and just kind of looking and seeing, and that's why they just look like crazy imagery. I have no idea. I got to grad school, and I'm like, what am I doing? I've been painting for 6 years by that point, making these really large. This is even bigger. This is a giant painting. And I wasn't having much success grade-wise in my graduate school, and the dialogue wasn't really helping me either. They were a more traditional bunch at that time. When you paint, at the end of your painting session, you clean your palette, you paint realistically. What is this? It was more about, I thought we had to write more about our paintings than paint. And we would have 2-3 critiques a week. Like, that's a lot of critiques, plus teaching classes and trying to make work, and you've got papers to write for art history and things. And so I was very confused, and it wasn't going well for me at all. And I distinctly remember this was a big drawing I did in figure drawing class, and Ron Christ was the professor for that. And I got along with Ron really well, but he had 2 other painters with him that just I did not see eye to eye with. And Ron was my figure drawing professor. And this particular piece, and you would lay out all your figure drawings, and then he would talk to you. And to describe Ron is just to describe a guy like, he could tell you you're getting a C, and you felt bad for him. Man, that must have been hard for Ron to tell me I got a C. Like, he was just such a nice guy. But he laid out my work, or I laid it out, and he stood there and he goes, I don't know if this is good or bad, but you're very passionate, and for now I'm just going to say it's good. And I said, I'll take it. And so I gathered myself. He said, I've never had anyone want to draw like this. And I guess at University of South Dakota, I had a lot of professors that came from Wisconsin, and that's a really vibrant art program. And it just seemed like it was a little more progressive, because they were more about like mixed media and incorporating things. And I got to Wichita State, and they're like, why would you tape paper together and put things on it? It doesn't make sense in any way. And so they didn't know what to say. Not that I was so advanced or anything, I was just different. And so they didn't really know how to address that. And so I was going to drop out of school. Wasn't going good. I said, man, I'm getting C's in the painting classes. I did okay in the drawing classes. I just don't get along with the faculty. And my wife was in the program with me. They actually accepted her first and then let me in after they let her in, after seeing my slides. And I took a printmaking class. And this is my very first woodcut that I actually did as an undergrad. But my wife said, well, you did okay in printmaking. Maybe you could switch over into printmaking instead of just dropping out of school. And thankfully, John Boyd, bless his heart, I called him in the summer. He was the printmaking professor, and he said, I'd love to have you. That also meant he didn't have to go recruit anybody, because he lost a grad student. But that's a whole other story. That guy got his girlfriend pregnant with twins. He had to leave. So there was an opening. So I was able to switch over to printmaking. I started... I knew a little bit about relief. My interests at the time were not, I'm very, very influenced by music. I love music, Americana music. Like I said, Tom Waits, John Prine, Bob Dylan, folk, blues, all of that. And I thought, well, I'll do something visual about that. And not really thinking that might have some kind of racial connotation. I was really interested in early blues. Well, who made early blues? Black people, African American people. And so I was making work to honor this type of musical heritage, but through my critiques, boy, I took some poundings. They brought a big name, William Bailey. Has anybody ever heard of William Bailey? He taught at Yale, and he's very well known for drawing pots, different sized pots and vessels, and he's really good at it. He doesn't even have to look at them. And so they brought him in, and he's a huge name. So he's in every drawing book. Nathan Goldstein and these guys who have amazing drawing books. William Bailey's in there. They brought him in. All of the grad students had to put their work up in a room. And my wife's a little Asian lady and did work about her heritage and how she was born in America, but no matter what she does, people always go, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from South Dakota. No, where are you from? So it's like difficult for her to, that's kind of airless or an airtight artist statement to, I'm dealing with this. And he sees my work and he goes around and he talks to everybody, he goes, I want to talk about these last. And this is in front of the whole grad school and all the professors. And he gets back and he goes, I want to talk about these now. And he said, these make me sick. This is the worst of the worst. Because he first said, who did this? And I raised my hand and he said, you are just mimicking racial cartoons that make me sick. And he berated me for like 15 minutes, and a big discussion ensued where John Boyd took up for me and said, that's not what he's intending. He has good craftsmanship, and I spoke up for myself, but it was a give and take, and we talked for a long time about this work and about, can a white guy make this kind of work? Is that okay? And this was late 90s. And it kind of ended, and boy, I felt terrible. There was no clear winner. It just went poorly. And I thought, man, that's not what I intended at all. And I was walking back to my studio in the print shop, and my friend who was in Printmaker too, and he's German and Iranian, and he came up and he said, don't be so upset. And I said, well, why not? Just basically they called me racist for like 40 minutes. He goes, they spoke about my work for 2 minutes. We talked about your work for 40. And I thought, well, at least that's something. So it made me start to think, well, maybe that's not the direction I want to go, though, because that wasn't my passion. I'm not trying to talk about, can a Caucasian make work about early blues music visually and things like that. So thankfully I graduated. And I started incorporating animals into my prints. Like, well, maybe I could, there's a lot of songs about milk cow calves blues and little red rooster and all these things. So I started moving into that, I guess, to be safer, but yet, you want to kind of do something that really says who you are, right? Like you're trying to find out who you are. I don't know who I was. I was 23, 24, I'm 51 now. I still kind of don't know. But I was moving on. I was starting to get influenced by, there was a big resurgence of, you've probably heard of Mumford & Sons and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And all these kind of Americana bands started getting really hot and it just exploded. And man, I was feeling that. I was really feeling that. Like I could really relate to these kinds of things. And reading about myths and legends of Americana, and the blues music talks about that as well. So I started, okay, this is starting to feel more like something I want to explore. And so I started creating these, as it said with the title of this show, parables or visual ballads. I like to play music myself. I play guitar, and I've been in a lot of different bands. Excuse me. But I'm a terrible musician. Not good. I'm a worse musician than a painter. And I can't really write songs, but I can come up with visual narratives. And so I explore that. I come up with words or sayings, or just trying to develop an interesting composition. Again, University of South Dakota was really great at talking about just visually. Even if you're doing something very representational and illustrative, what's your overall composition? This super shape. Okay, that's interesting from far away. Then I come in, something else grabs my attention. Then you come in again. Like you want to pull people in through a lot of different layers of your composition. So I work a lot with composition. That would be paramount for me. I developed my own little kind of copying Lind Ward. I'll do my own visual ballad book that tells a little tragic tale of like a guy on the road learning guitar, kind of a Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan kind of guy. And Hard Traveling Man, I think it's like 20 panels. It's on my website. And there's just a few of the different panels that tell this tale. There's no words in it. I mean, there's some signs here and there, but it just visually tells this progression of this traveling musician. At the same time, as I said, I was a painter, and bigger is always better. So I thought, what if I make these giant woodcuts? And so I had a big 4 by 8 foot panel in my basement, and I started drawing this Greek and Roman influenced the abduction of Europa, where Zeus turned into a bull and took this maiden off. It's an old classic Greek tale. And I thought, so this is a 4 foot by 8 foot, one board. And I thought, I'm just gonna start carving this, and I'm drawing on it. And my wife came downstairs and goes, well, how are you gonna print that? We don't have a press that size. Genius. I was like, she's nicer than that. But she might as well have said it like that. Hey, smart guy, how are you going to print that? And I'm like, I'll figure it out. So doing all this I was doing these kind of pinup work things, and I'll come back to that too, though. But I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay it on the floor of our basement studio, and I'm going to ink it up. And I bought a footer at Lowe's, like one of those cardboard tubes, and about 8 bags of Quikrete, and I capped one end, and I suspended a rod in it. I'm like, I'll make a big, heavy ass roller out of cement, and then I'll print it like that. Theoretically, it sounds wonderful, but in practice, it's very heavy. Quickrete's not meant to be rolled around a lot. It just kind of starts breaking up and sand. But I was able to print a few things. I would go this way, I would go that way. I experimented with having a felt on it, no felt on it, but I would roll it across multiple different directions, using weights for something besides exercising, dressing like I'm in a volleyball team or something. And then I would lift it up and see where I had to add more ink. And so I would print these with this giant roller that I very imaginatively named it the Big One. It worked for a while. My point being with some of these is I'm proud of these works, but at the same time, around those same years, we started to have kids. And so just like when I was doing work that had to deal with, I'm a white guy making prints with black guys in it that are playing blues, but black women and men playing blues music, is that really who I am when I'm trying to put out in the world? I make it kind of pinup art. And I had a daughter. And I thought, well, I'm proud of the craftsmanship and how these are going. And I try to use a little humor. This is called The Truth About Mermaids. And this is Pandora with all these tattoos on her and everything. So I was trying to add some layers. But again, I'm still kind of searching for what I can do to say about myself that I want to put out there in the world. And I wasn't so convinced that I wanted to be like a Mel Ramos kind of pinup artist guy. But it brought me a lot of attention. There's a large show in Little Rock called the Delta. Now they do it every 3 years. It went away for a while, but it used to be every year. And if you got work in the Delta, it was a big deal. It's in Little Rock. You're in all the newspapers. There's money, fame, and glory. I'd been in Arkansas since 2001, and I entered every year. Never got in. The 8th year I entered, I got this piece in. So I had entered 8 years or 7 years. I got in on the 8th year, and I got this piece in, and I was so excited. We drove to Little Rock, and they have a band, and they have booze, and they have food, and there's like hundreds of people there, and I'm so excited. Oh man, can't wait to see my work in the gallery of the Arkansas Museum of Art. Now it's called the AMFA. That they just redesigned it, but it was the Little Rock Museum of Art then. And I go in, and we look, and right behind the docent's desk, out in the hallway, is where they hung my work. So that was the first time I got in, and didn't win an award or anything, but I was in. I'm like, I'm in. Things are gonna happen for me now. Nothing happened. Cut to a few years later, I entered the Delta again, maybe 2013, and both of these works got in, these large kind of pinup-y works. This is inside the museum there during it. Again, this is me printing some of the big. I made this piece, got in as well with those large, basically naked lady pinup works. Sorry, it happens. So I got these 2 5 foot or 8 foot by 4 foot prints in, and this small little 2 by 2 foot block in. Got all my works in. And when I was painting a house to earn extra money in the summer, and I said, hey, the Delta notifies today in the mail. Check the mail. And she gets the mail and she goes, well, there's a mistake. I said, what's the mistake? She goes, well, all 3 of your works got in. And that just doesn't ever really happen. She's like, you need to call them and find out. I said, no, if it says all 3 works got in, I'm bringing all 3 works. It's on paper. So I brought them all in, and they got in and everything, and the 2 large naked lady type prints, and then this piece, which was a small, like I said, 2 by 2 foot woodcut. They had an awards presentation, much like a room like this, and I won the Delta with this piece, the smaller of the 3 pieces. And that got my noodle working. I was like, man, maybe that's the direction I want to do. Everyone told me this is too illustrative. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's been my direction ever since, really. I've explored it, combined different elements, moved them around, been tired of it, thought I can't think of anything else. I'm just doing the same old schlock, put a whiskey jug in there, I do this, do that. Am I still making new work? And then suddenly I'll go, man, what if I did this? What if I did that? And so I'm really trying to create this big body of work. I have quite a few of them now over in the gallery. Maybe there's 30? I forget off the top of my head, but there's around 30, but I probably have closer to 40. I didn't bring some of them. They won't fit in the van. I got too many. But this very first one started it all. Worst title ever. The Snake Shaker's Shack. Dealing with taking up serpents. The myths of you're closer to God, or, they shall take up serpents, things like that. Still, I can incorporate some of that love of the blues with it. I can still bring in some of that magic and myth that I like to read about and listen to. I can rip off famous artists. This is Pieta, Michelangelo, by way of St. Louis, where I saw has anybody been to St. Louis and seen the replica of the Pieta, where Mary's holding Jesus in there? Some people have. I took a few pictures of that. I'm like, man, I can rip that off and do my own thing. In the Pines, still being a 90s boy, the band Nirvana covering Lead Belly with a very famous closing of the acoustic Nirvana album, which is the title of this piece. Referring to classics, paintings, and sculptures other artists have done through the years. So St. George versus the Dragon, or St. George and the Dragon, large woodcuts. Hickory, still trying to bring humor into it, whether it's funny or not. I find it funny. Ripping off Van Gogh. Always try to wink and a nod to past artists that I like. Fish Lady of Toadsuck Holler. Toadsuck Days. Has anybody ever been to Conway, Arkansas? Conway, Arkansas is halfway between where I live, Russellville, and Little Rock, and they have a festival in the spring or the summer, and it's called Toadsuck Days. And I'm like, man, I'll make this and sell all these prints. Boy, they'll wanna. No. But I sold quite a few. These did well. This also did well at the Delta. I've been very lucky with the Delta show. Dealing with myth, with different ideas. What's the time? What's that? It's 6:30. I like to use reference material and freak out my neighbors, apparently. I made my wife push me around in a wheelbarrow to kind of use that for my reference of pieces. And so we really did this. And my son, who was about 9 at the time, I gave him my cell phone and said, make artsy pictures. He's not at all. He's in the business program at the school I work at. So he did his best. But I was able to use those reference pictures to create work that I use. This is probably one of my most popular pieces, Feather Signal. Recently got the one back that I gave my dad. My dad, if it doesn't have, who passed last week, if it didn't have a ball, a racket, or a bat in it, he wasn't that interested. He was a real sports guy, but with this one, he really liked it. So this means a lot to me, this piece, that he really liked it. So I gave him one of these, but like I said, now I got it back. Well, I'm going to give it to my sister, the one that I gave to my dad. I make editions of 10 of all my prints because I also have a really huge Neal Harrington collection. It just keeps getting bigger. I sell some of them, but if I made more than 10, I would have a really big Neal Harrington collection, because I also have to house the Tammy Harrington collection, my wife, who's a printmaker and artist and makes a lot of work. This looks a lot like my wife here. She's in charge. Through briar and bramble, we're kind of like, I call this like a double portrait, quadruple portrait, because this is like us hiding in the briars and brambles, and here we are trying to make our way through it. Delta Oracle, working with that bootleg, also dumb title, Bootlegger's Ballads. Not, it rhymes, I guess. Dealing with fables, stories, myths, religions, any of that kind of feeds into the art. There's a famous 3220 blues, Robert Johnson and a lot of blues artists cover. So I thought, what about 4 and 20 blues, like 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, but they're coming out of a smashed guitar. Many moons, that's something we said a lot in South Dakota growing up. How long you been gone? Many moons, Native American saying. This one took me a while to name. Soul food. I thought it was funny. My wife hates that. I thought it was very funny. You got to be equal. I first did favorite daughter. I'm like, oh, that'd be good. These gals fighting, And my wife, well, you got to do one with sons. And I thought, oh, rival sons, favorite. I think these are over there, but I consider this like a diptych. This as well, Virgo and Cancer. Just with the little bit of time I have left, because I want to take questions if anybody has any questions. I do commissions as well. And so a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago it probably was, a guy reached out to me for doing a really large commission, and this is one of the bigger commissions. I've done bigger work, but for money, I did this big commission, and he really just provided me with a concept. He wanted to have an image that spoke about, again, speaking truth to power, standing up for things you believe in. And gosh, I should have looked up the name. It's not Galileo, but a contemporary of Galileo's. You think I'd remember? I'm getting old, and it's been a weird week. But when the Catholic Church was making philosophers and astronomers renounce that the universe moved around the sun, this guy actually stood up and said, no, but that's incorrect. I don't care if you burn me at the stake. I'm going to stay with what's correct. And Galileo, I believe, recanted and said, you're right, everything moves around the earth, don't burn me. But this astronomer said, I'm going to tell the truth. I guess if it kills me, it kills me. And so that's what this big piece represents. I guess I'll close with this because it's always the big splash of a lot of things, but the Little Rock Airport had a competition, and my friend won a few years ago to design this, and I always mispronounce it because I'm an idiot, chorizo flooring. I always would say chorizo, and my friend would, who's a sculptor, would say, that's the sausage stuff. And he thought I was being funny, and it's just that I'm dumb. It's chorizo flooring, I believe. And she designed the flooring here at the Little Rock Airport for a lot of money. And they had another competition, and I was mowing the lawn with my son, and we went in to watch we were having some lemonade or water, and we were watching the news, and they said, the Little Rock Airport's going to have another competition for art that fits these parameters, and the application's due this Thursday. Well, that was like a Sunday, And he looked at me and said, "You should apply for this. Now, you've all seen my work." I told him, "I don't know if the airport's into that. I don't know if they want what I do." And he's like, "You should just apply." Because I said, "Okay." And I looked at the application process, and just if you made the cut with your website and proposal, you got $1,500 just to propose. And I'm like, "We're done working for the day. I'm going to go draw and come up with a proposal because I want to get that $1,500. I don't care if I win or not." And luckily, I was selected as one of the 4 to propose my project. And then you had to propose it through Zoom. I mean, it was weird times, man. We were coming out of COVID. This has been going on for about 3 years now. We were coming out of COVID, so it was all Zoom proposals and technology that's not working. And long story short, I got the gig. So in the Little Rock Airport, there'll be 3.5 by 6 foot wood panels. Didn't even have to print them. They framed them behind museum grade plexiglass, non-reflective, very high quality stuff, and they're framed up. They're going to build out the wall, and this is the artist's rendering. They're going to build out the wall so they're flush to the wall, and it'll have a really nice bar lighting situation. And then this is a picture of the founders of the airport that you can't move, even though they have about 4 others of it. And when I said, "Well, why can't you move that?" And they said, "Because the founders believe visitors might want to take a selfie in front of it." Anyway, so I'm competing with that. But so that can't go anywhere. That's already there. That's already there, by the way. And so to kind of be a wise guy, last time I took a trip, I took my selfie in front of it. I should have put that in the slides. That would have been killer. I have it, though. I have a selfie in front of it. Anyway, I'll have my panels up there coming soon. It's supposed to happen this February. The first panel, Homegrown, deals with the mountainous areas of Arkansas. And again, I just pulled this out of thin air, man. I wrote it in about a little proposal in about 20 minutes. What can I do? I'm not a mural painter. I'll do big giant woodcuts. I can do that. I can carve them, and I'll ink them up, and then I was going to cover them in resin, and they decided they didn't like the resin, and I had to do samples and this and that. Long story short, this is what they went for. These different panels that show these different kind of aspects of Arkansas. So Homegrown, the theme is, wait for it, home. Arkansas as home is the overall umbrella theme. So they're all a home themed. Homegrown, Down Home, which is kind of the waterways and marshy areas of Arkansas with all that flora and fauna. And then Home Sweet Home, which kind of talks about Little Rock and West Memphis and areas that are bigger cities. And the big capping part of all this is $91,000. I've never even met anybody that sold anything for that, but I did. I wish my parents were here to see that. My dad knew about it before he passed, but my mom died 6 years ago, but she was my biggest supporter. She would have been so all over. She would have told everybody. So I'm making sure I do. That's really the end of my presentation. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir, and then I'll get you.
So do you sketch things first before you?
Yes. Everything starts as a sketch. On the woodcuts, I'll sketch everything out and then get in with Sharpies, and you carve away what's not the Sharpie. But I sketch everything small and then draw it to scale. If it's a decent size and I want to save time, I'll print it out through a printer, tape it together, transfer it with transfer paper, but typically I'll just draw right on the wood. But I'll transfer things too. I'll use some technology. I don't really know how to use much technology, but I'll use simple technology of projection and transferring things. Do you have a question?
Yeah, do you really enjoy printing these black and white pictures with some rollers and ink in top of everything?
Yeah, I've dedicated my life to it. So I guess I could say I like it. I love it. I feel like I'm in my element. Not to beat it to death, but again, I've just had a tragedy and all this, and today I taught a class, and while I was teaching my class, our classes are, I don't know how long your classes are here, but mine are 3 hours long, or at least an hour and 50 minutes, 3 days a week, or 2 days a week for 3 hours. So I'm not just standing there looking at people. I'll bring in stuff to work on, and today I taught my drawing class. I try to go around 2-3 times, talk to every single person, how it's going, whether they pay attention or not, I don't know. But then I'll go back up front and I'll work on something. And man, just the act of carving the linoleum, I'm working on a new piece. I finally felt like, okay, everything's gonna be okay. Because so far it's just been nuts. Any other questions? I'll answer it, yeah.
Okay, so this was kind of a drawback to the movie. You talked about how you weren't really immersed in art. I was just wondering
Bless you.
if you're changing, like your pivotal point was, or the steps you took to really immerse yourself.
I think hard lessons. Hard lessons really, again, in the early 90s, if you said you wanted to be a comic book artist, they're like, well, why are you here then? And I'm like, well, because I don't know how to do that, and this is the biggest art school in the state, and I can go here. So, I mean, that's just where I went, and I guess I realized I didn't want to draw comics anymore because it just seemed like a formula, and now if someone gave me that job, I wouldn't want to draw superhero comics, I guess, because it just seems like, okay, they look like this. There's about 4 different poses. All the women look like this. All the guys either look like this or that, Hulk or Captain America built. All the women look like Storm or Rogue or, you know. I want to have more variety. And so I started looking at artists that were illustrative because that's what I was into. So Van Gogh, I'm going to space everybody's name probably, but Gauguin, very illustrative, Egon Schiele, I forget how to pronounce it. Anyone that was illustrative, Leon Gottlieb, I mean, even like, is it R.J. Katai? People, I mean, there was just a lot of people that were very illustrative, but yet I also loved Basquiat and Raw. That's what I always, whenever I'm carving anything, and I hate to keep bringing up names that we all might know, like John Boyd and people, just, it's so neat to meet people that went to my grad school. Nobody went there. My professor in grad school, he would not probably like the work I do now, only because he'd be like, I like it more raw, man. He would, so anytime I'm carving, when there's that happy accident, you know, or something doesn't go right, I'm like, that would be John's favorite part. Where I think, man, I really screwed that up. He'd come by and go, leave it. That's the best part. So I guess if I was a young artist now, you don't want to copy what other people do, but you want to immerse yourself in looking at things you like, and then it's hard to not mimic at first, and then hopefully you take a direction that's your own. And then you gotta just make a lot of it. I had a painting professor as an undergrad that said, you have to make like 100 paintings, 100 bad paintings before you make one okay painting. And he's right. Any other questions? There's going to be a reception, I guess, over at the gallery. Please come over and say hey. Sometimes people don't want to talk in front of other people or something, but thank you. Thank you for having me.